Hello, and welcome to the Earthship Enterprise. Here, Sovereign Non-Velodium, and I'm going to entertain you for Thanksgiving. We're giving thanks today for the fact that we all have our own Overton window, and for terrible lighting, and for the fact that there's free speech. It's a free country here in Vermont. Vermont is a free country. I love that phrase. It's a free country. It's like a. I wish there wasn't that glare. I don't know why there's a glare. Maybe it's because there's the screen's not clean. Oh yeah, I fixed the glare. All right, we're doing good. I love that phrase. It's a free country because it's such an easy retort for anyone who wants to control you. It's like, and it was just like a natural retort for a long time when America was a free country, if it ever was. But now it's obviously not, so no one ever uses the phrase. But I'm bringing it back. I'm bringing it back. It's a free country. So I'm all about OG things, the original things, bringing the original things back. And in light of that, I'm going to say the most outrageous things possible for the next hour or two or however long it takes. And that's partially tea. That's partially my breath. My breath is also making fog, but I've also got tea by the camera. So I've got three general subjects I want to cover. So basically, it's Thanksgiving, and I want to give thanks for the viewers out there, both the integrators and the deriders. The integrators, because you're like me, and we're family, and we're on our way. And for the deriders, because they need food too. So let's feed the deriders. Give them lots of good food to deride, so that they have something to talk about in their derisionary conversations with people. Because there's nothing really wrong with that. That's just the way they are. So I'm going to talk about the most outrageous things I can. I'm going to cover Christianity. I'm going to cover America. And the third subject I have to cover, darn it, I'm forgetting already. Wait, no, well, more specifically, Washington, Christianity, and I forgot the third. So it's not a good start. But I've got no notes, and I'm gonna try to go quick too. And I'm gonna hopefully remember along the way what the third subject is that I wanted to cover. But the point of this is for entertainment. Though for the integrators out there, they'll probably find some useful nuggets, some pearls amongst the muck, and we can be grateful that everyone has their own Overton window. And if you don't know that term, you can look it up, and you'll be grateful by the end of this that my Overton window is not your Overton window, and therefore my Overton window can be something you can deride and humor and ridicule and laugh at. And yet we all were going somewhere, and so it's like a wormhole from my Overton window to your Overton window. And as long as you look at it as entertainment and humor, you can not be triggered by the things that I say. So I almost feel like the third subject I wanted to cover was supposed to come first, and so this is really messing up my whole thing. But anyways, how's this lighting? I got a little Einstein luck with my hair. I'm not going to go into the Einstein stuff and the science stuff and how the science is. Anyways, so the first subject I want to cover is how Washington was a traitor to the revolution. So this is going to trigger a lot of people because the feds have created a cult of George Washington, and there's like a picture of him like ascending to heaven, and he's like the perfect general, and he's like the most noble person who stepped away from power, and he's the founding father, and he's the greatest. So I'm gonna take the next unforeseen amount of time to shred that narrative, and I'll try to do it somewhat humorously, but mostly factually, but also very ignorantly, because I didn't have a lot more research to do. But I've got a number of charges against Washington. First charge, warmonger. So World War One was called the 7 Years' War, and in America, the 7 Years' War is called the French and Indian War. And basically, war started in America between France and Britain, and then that war extended to the rest of the world, so that all of Europe and down in like in the Caribbean, and I think even over like in Asia and in India, basically the entire world ended up fighting because of Britain and France fighting, and they both had basically worldwide empires, and then all these other countries and their alliances ended up fighting. And I don't know how many millions died in the 7 Years' War, or if it was all the way up to a million, because World War II, or AKA one, was way more deadly, and then two, aka three, was even more deadly. But we're going to talk about World War One, which is the 7 Years' War, and I'm going to tell you how it started. So World War One started because of George Washington. He personally and singularly started World War One, the 7 Years' War, and he did it out of his greed, his self-serving greed, and his lack of respect for humanity and his fellow man. So here's the story. So George Washington was a crown-appointed agent of the crown stormtroopers of Virginia, and he was born into aristocracy, and then he married other aristocracy, and he's a big slaveholder. And so he enslaved many of people, serving the empire and gaining big wealth, and having and becoming basically the largest slave master, landowner, puppet of the empire in Virginia. And they had this idea, him and this dimwit governor, to form what was called the Ohio Company, or Ohio River Company, or Ohio Company, something like that. I've got a whole book about the Ohio Company. I haven't read it yet, but here's what I've got so far. So the point of the Ohio Company is to colonize the Ohio River basin, because at the time the King of England had made this proclamation that said that basically the Appalachian Mountains was the limit of the English domain. And so all of the English claims are based off of the rivers, and the maritime claims, the maritime, like the river, the water-based power of the crown. And because they claim the entire sea, they say that they can also claim the rivers that go into the land. And so that's how their jurisdiction is applied, maritime power. They start by claiming all the water, all of the sea. So the crown claims the sea, the entire ocean, and then because the rivers flow into the sea, they also claim the rivers. So then they can put cities at the headwaters of the rivers, and then dominate the rivers and the trade that comes from the rivers, and then all of the water that runs into the rivers, the runoff area of the rivers, that becomes the land that is also claimed by extension of claiming the river and claiming the sea. And so it's geographical. So because of the Appalachian Mountains, everything to the east is shedding out to the Atlantic. That's why the British, the Crown says that there's like this line along the Appalachian Mountains, so that only the land that sheds to the east to the Atlantic is the claim, basically, and everything over that is basically the French claim, because the French are claiming the Louisiana, which is the Mississippi River. So the Ohio land, what they call Ohio, is all shedding water down to Mississippi, and so the British have no claim to it. But Washington and his friends are greedy people, and they are also traitors. So they start off as traitors to the crown, so they don't respect the maritime law of the crown, and they want to, on their own law, just extend, and they want to claim the land of Ohio for themselves, and then sell it and make a profit off of it, even though it's against their own king. So they start off as traitors to the crown, but and for their own purposes, for their own profit. And so the goal is they form this company. So Washington is in it, and this dimwit governor from Virginia are in it, and everyone with money and greed and no principles are in it, who just want to speculate on land and get more profit, and they're all traitors. So they make this Ohio River Company, and at the time, the French they had like forts out in the headwaters of the Ohio, and they were working well with the natives, and they had different treaties and trade agreements with them, and they didn't have any sort of genocide agenda with the natives. They were just kind of trading furs with them and kind of treating them with respect for the most part. And they had someone traveling up the Ohio, and they were putting like these markers around the river and saying like lead markers, like here, almost like a mile marker but on a river. And they were kind of doing that to 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 put their property out there and state their claim. And they also had some forts out there in the Ohio area. And so Virginia didn't really have a western limit. Well, it didn't until the Crown created the limit, which was at the Appalachian Mountains or whatever. So that wherever the watersheds to the east was the extent of the limit of Virginia. But Washington and his friends were not to be limited in their greed and ambition, and so they created this Ohio Company, and they want to claim the entire the land of Ohio, and just for their profit. They're just very greedy and unprincipled traders for their own profit. And so they create a plan of how to claim this land, and that entails basically creating war with France, and then basically trying to steal France's claim. And basically in they do this through the company, and so they have rules for the company. And so the company rules are like it's an incentive structure, and so they say to Washington basically. And so another thing to understand back then is that the militaries were basically just the arms of empire to enforce trade, essentially. So it's all based off of profit for trade, and the military is just there to ensure the profit, the enforcers of the profit. So in this instance, the governor in Washington and their cronies, their company and incentive profit mechanism is to claim this land of Ohio for themselves, not for the crown. So once again, I don't know how many times I can say it, but they're traders. They're all traders. Everyone in this Ohio River Company, they're traders because they're directly going against the rules of the crown. They're not revolutionaries. They're not doing it for freedom. They're doing it for profit. They're just plain traders. And so Traitor, they're not trading. They're like, even traders are doing something good, because traders they're making a lot of profit, but they're providing a service of trading. But traitors, they're not providing any service. They're just betraying the crown and trying to profit by doing so. And I'll contrast this with what the Vermonters were doing, because the Vermonters had their own land company, like Ethan Allen. They made their own land company, but it was much different. And it all ties into the 7 Years' War. I don't know if I'll get into all of that here, but back to the Ohio River Company. So basically, they have an incentive structure in the Ohio Company that says, like, if you go and you build a fort, then you get this amount of acres. Like, you get 100,000 acres if you build a fort, and then if you have like this many settlers that come within this amount of time, like within a year, if you get like 100 settlers, then you get like 200,000 acres. And so there's like an incentives mechanism set up in this company, so that George Washington is incentivized to invade Ohio and to colonize it and to set up forts, and then he gets more land if he does that. So, getting to the point of the conflict, so Washington is sent as a delegate of this company, and also as basically the general of the Virginia militia, and on half of the governor of Virginia, Dimwit, who is but not on behalf of the crown, because this is against the orders of the crown, which had that proclamation line at the Appalachia, whatever. So Washington is sent out to this French fort that's out in the Ohio area, and he's an absolute failure at basically everything he does when it comes to the military. He can't find the place. He doesn't have scouts. The nature basically like conquers them and terrifies them on their way. And finally they get there, and maybe they have like some casualties and stuff, and they get lost, and they have all sorts of complaints about just nature. They can't even deal with the nature there. But finally, they get someone to the fort, and then they deliver a message to the fort that says, like, now we claim this area, um, on behalf of the company, essentially. So get gone, get out of here, y'all, with the y'all Frenchies in your fort in your Louisiana watershed area. Um, and so the French are like, uh is this serious? Like, this isn't how civilized people act. Like, we're not even the commanding generals. And so basically the French are like, you need to, if this is like a real diplomatic thing, you need to send this to the commanding French general in this place, which I think was up in Canada at the time, which was like in Quebec or something like that, maybe Montreal. And they're like, you need to send this demand to the like the American department of of the French people. Like, this has to go to this guy. And it's like, well, like, who are these idiots? Um, so basically, they then have to they decide to send a diplomatic response to Washington's letter, to the fort. And basically that's what the letter from the French says, is that if you're doing this diplomacy, we don't have the authority here. We're just like low level commanders, like, commanding this fort, and you need to send this diplomatic thing, on behalf of your governor and your king, up to the French commanding general, who can then communicate the situation under his authority, or communicate with the king in France or whatever. And so the French send a diplomatic response to Washington's, um, the Ohio Company, like, threat letter, essentially. And so the French are like diplomatically responding, and they're like, all right, I guess we have to send a whole troop of scouts and people with our diplomat to get our diplomat across the wilderness, because the diplomats don't know how to, like, survive in the wilderness at all. So they need all sorts of scouts and rangers and such, like, basically like the traders. Now we're using the D word, the traders, like the fur traders and the trappers that the French were working with, are basically then the escort for the diplomat to then cross the Appalachian to the nearest English fort, and give their response, to basically say, like, this is improper diplomatic protocol. You need to communicate with the appropriate general who has the authority. And so what does Washington do? He gets his company militia together, and they set out an ambush. And at this point, Britain and England are at peace. Um, they have some sort of competing claims in some areas, which are mostly around Lake George area, because of its geography, which sheds into Lake Champlain. So Lake George is, but anyways, that's basically where most of the competing issues are, in the Vermont area, because Vermont is really close to New Hampshire, which sheds into the Connecticut River, and it's really close to the rest of New England. But Vermont is not New England. It's specifically not New England because Vermont is the land that sheds water, not the current state lines, but historically, Vermont is basically the land that sheds water up to the north to the St. Lawrence Seaway, which includes the watersheds of Lake Champlain and Lake George. But I don't want to limit what is Vermont, because Vermont is also basically ends up being, that's like the area that is contested for a while, and it's actually other area in, like, now the geographic state of Vermont, which is also the area that's contested, because part of that does shed to the St. Lawrence, and then part of it sheds to the Hudson River. And so anyways, so back to the Ohio River Company. So the French send this delegation to be like, y'all did it wrong. Y'all sent the letter to the wrong person. This is how you do diplomacy, you dimwit. And your little upstart bulldog, George Washington. But he's not a bulldog. I mean, that would be like way too nice of a thing to say to George Washington, because he's not a bulldog at all. He's more like a poodle. a poodle that is pampered and is also like savage in its pampery, and overlords all of the other smaller chihuahuas. A poodle with a gang of chihuahuas, and the poodle is like more savage than the chihuahuas are. Anyways, so George Washington gets like this ambush force together, and then they stir up all of this propaganda media, like, oh, the French are invading us. They're sending an invasion force, when the French are just responding to his diplomatic things. So they basically set up an ambush, and without warning, they ambush this French delegation, and then the poodle Washington also has some Indians working with him, and in this ambush force. And so they kill a bunch of the Frenchmen, and specifically they kill the head of the diplomat, the head of the French delegation, and bash his head in with a hatchet and then scalp him. And so in like this absolutely brutal way. And the British have no losses. They ambush them in the morning when the French delegation were basically waking up and like making tea or coffee or whatever. They're just getting started for the day before setting out. And the British ambush them and just savagely murder the head of the French delegation. This is all completely true. And so they kill up something like a dozen Frenchmen, roughly, of their party of maybe like 30 or something like that. And Washington probably has like 100 and 120 something, somewhere around there. Just kind of spitballing these numbers off the top of my head. And Washington's quote. So his first dispatch that goes back basically says, "I need a raise. I need to get paid more." Back to Dimwit. So he's basically the enforcer. But his quote relative to this situation is something along the lines of, I'm going to butcher it, but it's that the sound of bullets are so sweet, or something like that. I probably butchered it, but he's talking about the sound of bullets and how it sounds so sweet in the morning. So this is the kind of psychopath that George Washington is, as he's just murdering all of these people with absolutely no cause. They're just responding to his message, and they have the head of the delegation killed in the most brutal way. The rest of them just got shot, but the head of the delegation got his head bashed in with a tomahawk and then scalped by an Indian. And so Washington, there's no remorse. It's, oh, the sound of the bullets are so sweet, and then I need to get paid more, and I need to plug my phone in. So this ultimately becomes an unbelievable affront to the French. Like it's a declaration of war. That's what it is, because Washington is the head of the military forces of Virginia, who the governor is Dimwit, and Dimwittle or something like that. Just Dimwit. It's easy to remember him as Dimwit. Washington and Dimwit. So this is an act of war, and basically that is what caused the French and Indian War. That's the start of the 7 Years' War, which is basically more aptly termed World War I. So George Washington personally started World War I through this series of events that I just told you. And if you really understand it, he's a complete murderous psychopath, and doing it all for profit. There's not a single thing positive to say about him in this whole thing. But then we'll continue, because the trend continues in the next phase, where once the war is basically established, or once he's done this act of war against the French. So the next incentive system in the Ohio Company is that if you set up a fort and then you get some settlers there within like 2 years, then you get like 100,000 or 200,000 acres, a whole bunch of land Washington gets. So that's what he's going to do. So he's an awful general. He's an awful like military person. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing, but he's not interested in military matters. He's interested in profit and profiting himself and his company. So he goes into some place and creates Fort Washington. Of course, he names it after him, because what else is he going to do? He's got no idea, or he's got no principle or anything. He's just a greedy individual slave master, and that wants more land, who wants more slaves, who wants his own empire. And so basically they set up this fort in an area that's completely undefensible. That's like less than 100 yards from a tree line, and it's in like the lowland of a river delta or something, and it's like surrounded by forest, and they make this little fort, which is it just in a completely undefensible position because anyone can just hide behind trees in the tree line and be basically within firing range of this fort. And it was just an awful fort. One of just no military stratagem involved, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to set up a fort and to send civilians there, and hopefully they live long enough that Washington can get his 100,000 acres. And so basically, what happens is after he's like kicked the beehive, stirred up the beehive, which is an awful idea to do. I've done it before. It's a really dumb thing to do, but sometimes you do dumb things for dumb reasons. I don't know why. I don't know why I did it. I was an idiot. Washington, luckily, the worst thing that happened when I did the beehive was like someone might have gotten stung. I don't even know if someone did get stung, but someone got really mad that they might have gotten stung because they were allergic, and then they got mad at me for it. And the bees, obviously, the bees were pissed off. But I didn't kick it. I hit it with the buttstock of my rifle during military training at boot camp. Yeah, I do dumb things. So, anyways, no one got stung. But I feel bad for the bees, honestly, and I feel bad for myself because one guy got really mad at me, and then he manhandled me because I was just a boy and he was like a young man. Anyways, so after he's like did this act of war, then he's going to go and set up this fort there, and he sets it up in a completely indefensible place on the headwaters of this Ohio River place, far or just west of Virginia. And that's going to be their claim to the Ohio River Valley, is that they're going to militarily force the French out. And once they create a war, then obviously then they won't be limited by this like Appalachian Mountain Proclamation from the King or whatever. And that's the whole goal. So their goal was to create a war so that they could claim more land for themselves, and they could sell it to people and they can make a big profit. And so he sets up this fort, which is completely indefensible, the position of it. And what do you know? What happens is that the French come and the English fort gets overrun because all the French need to do is put people in the woods, and then the fort's surrounded, and there's basically nothing they can do, and it's just the easiest siege ever. And if the English want to break out of their fort, which is like a muddy, mucky, just awful mess, terrible engineering, they've got to cross 100 yards of open terrain, and they just get shot from the people in the woods. And a whole bunch of British settler people, New England, Virginian people, they get massacred in this whole situation. The fort is lost, the people get massacred, and so that's the second charge against Washington. The first is that he's a warmongering, greedy person who has no diplomatic protocol, and he revels in the murder that he causes and expects more payment because of that. And then the second charge is this fort that he sets up and names after himself, and then all of these other people die. His own people die, so he's willing to kill the other people. He's willing to have his own people get killed. They're not his people, but just his little pawns, his slaves in his empire. And I think like 100 or maybe a couple hundred people or something die in this second charge. And obviously the 7 Years' War is going on, so there's thousands, tens of thousands of people getting killed all across the world because of Washington's psychopathy. So let's get into the third charge against Washington is at the Battle of Boston. So at the Battle of Boston, so the Bostoners are the greatest people in New England. Mind you that the Vermont people are not in New England. Vermont is their own thing, separate from New England. And when I say New England at that time, I mean all of the 13 colonies. That's the new England. I don't mean just like the Northeast ones, but the Bostoners are the best because they're the most passionate for liberty. And they set up these like groups, the Sons of Liberty, and they're fighting for a cause, for a principle, for liberty, for freedom, to get rid of this foreign overlordship. And part of the reason is because a lot of them are Irish, and the Irish hate the British anyways because they've been fighting against the Empire for a long time. So the Irish went to a new land, and not just the Irish. There's a lot of Scots as well, but anyways, the people of Boston are at like the vanguard, or at the forefront of the revolution. Well, relative to the 13 colonies, because the Vermonters are really at the forefront, even ahead of the Bostoners, but they're in their own position, and I'm not going to focus on them right now. But anyways, because this charge is all related to Boston, and and sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. Got a little early morning. There's other people around, and trying not to disturb other people's peace. Yeah, I started or woke up at like 4:30 and wanted to give thanks, and this is how I'm giving thanks and giving y'all some beef to work with. I mean turkey. I'll be at turkey. I'm having morning turkey. Some might have beef from the turkey, but if you got beef with the turkey, you gotta pardon it, right? Because it's Thanksgiving. I was thinking that the new anyways, never mind. Stupid tangent about the thing about pardoning turkeys. Um, and so the Bostoners are like the best liberty focused principled people, and so America as a land, which is actually called Vermont, the whole continent, the whole country is Vermont, but I'll call it America just for communication purposes, for the audience's sake, even though it is a disgrace to the country to call it America, to name it after this agent of Columbus and like the Medici Italian banker family, Amerigo Vespucci, who didn't really discover anything, but he was just the guy who wrote things down. And sometimes history just favors the people who write things down, because the writings last longer, and the people who write the things can become like gods. Oh, God wrote this, and therefore the whole continent will be named after this guy who drew a map a long time ago and doesn't share any of the principles of what the country. So the whole country, the whole continent, the whole thing it represents is it's the land of the free, and it's all about liberty and the free people individually being sovereign. And when people align with this ideology, these principles, these ideals, which align with the country, then they are blessed, and they have good jaws, good luck and fortune. They're blessed by providence. Like the settlers who, when they started off and they made like a socialist communist pact in Plymouth, they all started dying of plague and famine, and they failed in everything they did. And only when they got rid of their socialist communist collectivist pact, and they allowed people to act individually, then they started thriving. Because that's the disease of the Eurasia continent, is of socialism and communism as a collectivism of government top down collectivism, which is just it's a powerful plague. And Africa, the homeland, is free of that plague for the most part, but it's also, anyways, it's somewhat, it's not as powerful, but it's healthier, which is incredible that it's remained so despite the plagues surrounding it. Anyways, back to Boston. So these rabble rousers, these liberty-minded people in Boston, they do the Boston Tea Party, and they organize all of these kind of protests against the British taxation, because the free country needs a free market. And when the crown is interfering with the free market, basically what the crown is supposed to do, they're supposed to exist off of taxing the trade, because they have a monopoly on the seas. The trade needs to go over the seas, so the crown needs to exist off of the traders with a D. And yet the traders also kind of hate that the most, because they're getting their profit infringed on. And so a lot of the kind of liberty oriented people out of Boston are actually these traders, with a D. So there's nothing wrong with traders, but they just don't like being taxed so much. But that's just the nature of the situation, because a trader needs to go to a port. The ports are all set up by the crown. The crown controls the port and the port authority, and so the traders have to pay the tax when they dock their ships. And it makes sense for the system to work that way. But the British, being overextended in their empire ways, decide to tax all of the people, which they have no right to do. And when they try to make basically a 2% stamp tax, which is just a tax on official transactions, and they say some transactions have to be official. Which I don't want to get into everything that they claim is an official transaction, but it's not even it's not even on everything. It's just and it's a 2% tax. So the people in the land of the free were so liberty oriented and principled that when the crown tries to impose a 2% tax on them, they're ready to just fight to the death. You will not tax us 2% on some things. Absolutely not. We will die before you will tax us on 2% on some things. So when I say in other videos that this is the land of the slaves currently, it is, because people are taxed more than 10 times 2%, and they just fucking take it like a slave, because they have no principles, they have no courage, they have no backbone, they have no liberty. Yeah, I'm talking to you, everyone who's listening, because you all pay your taxes and you think it's a virtue that you're a slave. They've indoctrinated you so much that you believe you're free and you think your slavery is a virtue. But I'm telling you about actual free people who will fight to the death over a 2% tax, and that's the people of Boston and around there, basically. So they're so awesome that when they do the Boston Tea Party, and it wasn't just the people of Boston, because they did the Boston Tea Party thing throughout the kind of in many different ports, not just Boston. And so there's a good deal of organization. They set up these liberty commissions, but there's also the Masons that exist, and the Masons have lodges in all these different areas, and the Masons are directly connected to the Jews, which is evidenced by the Knights Templar connection. So one of the degrees of Masons are the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar are the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, and the Masons actually, that's the Temple of the Jews. So they're the mercenary knights that serve the Jews. And that's where this idea of Judeo-Christian, because the Knights Templar are primarily Christian, but they serve the ends of the Jews. And then so the Masons actually just read this book. So Thomas Paine is a great guy, and this is his little pamphlet on the origin. You can't actually see it, on the origin of Freemasonry. You can't see the lighting. Anyways, it's a little pamphlet. It's read it in about a half an hour or something. It's really short. And so Thomas Paine is who wrote all of the common sense essays. And so he's a great guy who's sharing these ideas of liberty and principles and ideals and common sense and good propaganda. And I don't think he's a Mason. He's definitely not a Mason. And he says, if we don't hang together, we'll hang separately. So you might as well come together and fight for freedom, even if they're going to hang all of us, because if you don't, they'll just hang all of the freedom-speaking patriots separately. So yeah, I just read that. He basically says, and so it's always interesting to get information from another time period, because currently we've progressed into a time where, just like the 1984 book that I've never read, that they have the thought police, and they edit the history. It's an ongoing process in the present moment of editing history in the past to serve the agenda of the present administration. So that's been going on all throughout history, is they're always editing the history to serve the agenda of the present people. And so if you look at the history from a historical, from 250 years ago, you look at what they considered history then compared to what we consider history on the same subject now, you get contrasting perspectives, which is fascinating, because their perspective then hasn't gone through, it has 250 years less of kind of editing of the history that's going on. And people now who are in the cult of the modern culture, they think that the editing of history is getting closer and closer to the truth, but in fact it's doing the opposite. It's covering up the truth, it's getting further from the truth, and introducing propaganda that serves the agenda of the present rulers. his story of the present he who's in charge and who's writing the story, so that the further forward you go into the future, the less accurate the truth of the past becomes. So if you look back in the past at the history that they say then, you get a more accurate view of history. So that's what has to be done. I think there's a cat knocking on the window, but I don't see her, and at some point I'll have to let her in, and I'll cut when I do that. I'll just do it right now. Or maybe I won't cut. I don't know. You'll have some. I'll cut. Okay, I'm back, and the fierce Princess Kitty is back inside. She's the ultimate survivor. She survived over 3 weeks, locked in a shipping container in the dark with no water, and she's the ultimate survivor. There's no one that can compare. It was an accident, and she's amazing, and she's doing great. So, where was I? I was talking about Boston, and we'll just carry on there. Boston. So the Boston people are the most rebellious against the empire, essentially. And so they sent the Lexington and Concord, the Boston authorities. They basically send troop out, a company of men out to arrest the people and raid their armory, because these councils of liberty, or whatever they're called, they're organizing the militia and creating the Minuteman, so that a real I gotta watch my words, but a real American, and like I said, I don't like the term, but a real person of the country should be ready to fight on a minute's notice. Everyone has to be in the militia, and the only tax that is right for the people is to tax the people who aren't in the militia. So if you're in the militia, then there's no right to tax you. If you're not in the militia, there is a right to tax you, so that you have to pay your fair share towards the militia, basically. But if you're fighting in the militia, then you pay the wage of one person of your life, and that's basically what is due of all men. That all men, women are exempt because they're a superior class, and the men all have to be willing to fight to the death on a minute's notice to defend the women and defend the principles and the ideals of the country and of liberty. So if there's a threat to the principles or to the women, then the men have to be willing to sacrifice their life on a minute's notice. So that's America. And I'm going to contrast that with what the cult of Washington and the feds are, which is the empire, which is the enemy of America. And then I'm going to champion John Stark as the champion of America, even though every time, just as a caveat, whenever I say the word America, just know that I have a little wince within me, because I have no respect for Amerigo Vespucci, and the continent should not be named after him. And if I have my way, over time in the Overton window, because my Overton window is in another dimension, and I'm just reaching you through this wormhole device. And eventually, if other people reach me in this dimension, we won't be just like Trump in a day. He's like, now it's called the Gulf of America, not the Gulf of Mexico. So when if there's ever the opportunity. Anyways, it doesn't have to be top down. That's the whole thing. That's the wrong idea. It's just from the bottom up. So eventually, over time, as I generate general knowledge, there's more people in my Overton window, and there's not such a dimensional gap between our Overton windows. We can just call America Vermont. But for the time being, up here comes the princess, the fierce warrior, Princess Kitty, survivor of all. Pishna. She got a new name too. It's a great name, Pishna. I don't even know what it's from. Okay, so right. So the British, the enforcers of the empire, the stormtroopers go out to arrest the Liberty people, and raid their armories, because they've set up logistics to support the militia and whatnot. So that's what leads to Lexington and Concord and these great Minutemen who have been drilling, because you have to have a militia being necessary for a free state. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. So it's not saying that like you just deserve to have a gun. No, it's that you deserve to have a gun. You are required to have a gun because you're in the militia. And if you're not in the militia, then the right doesn't extend to you. But all people are required to be in the militia, and the people who aren't in the militia are taxed. So just this is the fundamental basis of how everything starts. So here I am. I am defending the free country. I'm in the militia. I am principled, and to use your terms, I am a true American. You are not in the militia, and you're paying tax to the empire, and you are an enemy of the real Americans. Even though I don't even like the term, but you know what I'm saying. And also, I should be taxing you. I should be taxing you because you're not in the militia, and you have to support me, who is in the militia. And no, the National Guard is not the militia, and the Standing Army is not the militia. Those are the agents of empire. The Standing Army has nothing to do with the militia. The militia is the antithesis of the standing military. And once again, we'll get into that because Washington, he is the champion of the Standing Army, whereas Stark is the opposite. And then Washington, being his sliminess and wanting to just steal from the real people, he wants to claim the principle from the people who are principled while doing the antithesis of what the principled people do. So he creates this Cincinnatus society based off of this Roman general, Cincinnatus, who was like a farmer, or he was like a retired general, and then he's like a farmer, and then like Rome, the empire's in chaos, and like, what will we do? We'll have to call on Cincinnatus. Come, Cincinnatus, save us from everything. And then he's like, all right, I guess I'll come out of my farming retirement. And then he goes into battle, and he wins all the battles, and he puts all the shit in order, and he saves the empire, and then he just is like, all right, I did my job, I'm going back to my farm, and I'm retiring. I think he actually did that twice. And so he becomes this kind of archetype of the ideal kind of person who retires to their farm. And so Washington wants to name himself after Cincinnatus when he does the complete opposite. He goes into the government, and he stays in the government. He creates the standing army, and John Stark is the real Cincinnatus who does his job, and then he retires to the army, and he doesn't join these stupid organizations, and yet anyways, there's this one autobiography. I've read several autobiographies on John Stark. I haven't read a single one on Washington because, he's really not worth the focus and time. But I've read several about John Stark. So we're getting into Boston, the third charge against George Washington. And it's also like one of like maybe the third, at least the third, if not like the fourth, fifth, sixth triumph of John Stark. So John Stark has all sorts of triumphs in the French and Indian War, which was started by George Washington. So he has all sorts of great triumphs where he has a background of he got kidnapped by Indians, the French and the Indians, the Indians serving the French, because he was basically in their territory, essentially. And I'm not sure exactly. I would have to look at the geography if the Indian raiding party was like in New Hampshire, or like what side of the Appalachians he was on. He very well was probably like not in French territory, but regardless, he got captured. I know it's a tangent, but the whole tangent is just that John Stark has a number of triumphs before Boston, where he is acting with principles. He respects the natives, even though they kidnap him. He respects the natives, and the natives respect him. They've kidnapped him. He earns their respect. They call him chief. So think about it. You take a prisoner, and then the prisoner so impresses you that you call the prisoner chief, and you treat them with the utmost respect, and you give them like the daughter of the chief to bed them because you think they're just like the greatest people. and then you let him go when he wants to go, and then he gets ransomed back. So the French treat the Indians with respect. The Indians treat John Stark with respect, and John Stark respects the Indians, and therefore he would never take part in any kind of genocide against the Indians. But not George Washington. George Washington he's all about genociding the Indians, and the standing army centralized military thing that he creates, the Fed, the Fed that is his child, or it's not even it's sort of his child, but he's basically just the pawn of other empirical forces like the Masons and these like aristocrats, and they're probably connected to a religion that we're not going to talk about. But anyways, getting to Boston. So the British, they want to raid the armory. They want to go on an expeditionary punishment, a punitive expedition or whatever against the Boston people. But they're ready for it. So they've got all these Minutemen and not just Washington, but the whole people of like Massachusetts and New Hampshire, basically that whole area, what is now considered kind of New England. So they're not having it. They're not going to let these stormtroopers kill their champions and steal their arms. And they do what is necessary of a free people. They rally the militia and they drive back the imperial aggressors. And they do it so successfully that the British basically are like in flight from this expeditionary force back to Boston, and it basically turns into a siege right away because everyone's just like so pissed that the British even tried to do such an outrageous thing, and the militia has already been raised, and so they basically chase this expeditionary force back to Boston, and they just set up a siege. And so the British at this point are they've got a whole army, and it is well, I don't know if they had a whole army yet or if they sent reinforcements to Boston, but basically they're isolated in the city of Boston, and all the land around it is the free land of the free people, the free land, the militia. And so John Stark during the French and Indian War, he's basically an OG of the Rangers, which is now the Army Rangers, but he was a Robert Ranger before, which is the origination of the Army Rangers. So John Stark is basically the original Ranger, the one that you can point back to. That's the original, even though some would say that Roger was the original. He wasn't the original. He's like a Washington type figure that he doesn't really have principles, but he gets the things named after him, and he's just like greedy and whatnot. But Stark is the original Ranger, and his first Ranger expedition is essentially tracking back the route of the Indians. So he is like he's the Ranger serving the New Hampshire militia, which is then going to like a justice kind of commission militia to figure out what happened. Because when John Stark got kidnapped by the natives, um, someone got killed, or two people got killed, and him and his friend got kidnapped, and someone got killed. And so he is the ranger that leads the expedition of the militia to track the area that they went. So from that's the origin point of the Rangers is John Stark. Then Robert Ranger Robert, what am I having a problem with this? Robert Rogers. Um, he's like sort of a neighbor of John Stark, and he gets caught up in this counterfeiting scheme, and he basically forms the Ranger Company to kind of get out of prosecution for being caught up in this counterfeiting scheme and defrauding the locals. And throughout he's his whole history, he's got no problem killing natives and massacring natives and doing unprincipled things for profit. And then he turns again, and basically when it's the revolutionary time, he's out to just sell himself for whoever's going to pay him more. He doesn't care if it's the Americans or the British. And so he's got no principles, and so he's not a good OG Ranger person to look back to. His brother William maybe a little bit better, and who was pivotal in the capture of Quebec. And if the Americans weren't traitors, if like the American aristocracy in the Congress weren't serving the Masons and the Jews, and basically a competing top-down system with the Crown, because the Crown is just a competing top-down system with the Catholic Church. It's just divide and conquer. So the British Church is to the Catholic Church as the American Continental Congress is to the British, if you can understand that. So it's classic divide and conquer, and they're serving foreign powers. Um, so if they would have employed William Rogers, Robert's brother, who basically, so in the hierarchy, so Robert is the first one, then he hires his brother, and then he hires John Stark as the third. When they're working for the British in the original Robert Rogers company, even though John Stark is the first, that's according to the British and their pay. Robert was the captain, and John Stark was the second lieutenant, and William was the first lieutenant in the original Rangers company. So they have, and then so there's a whole story of the Rangers in the French and Indian War, and Robert gets into all sorts of trouble because he's egotistical and he sets up these Ranger rules and he doesn't even follow his own rules, and he gets a lot of people killed, and then Stark is always there to basically save the day and do incredible feats and just great wisdom, and he's always there as like the moral compass and kind of the advisor and saving the day, and he's the greatest. um, so you can read all about this in like there's books about it. I've already read them. And so um, Stark has a legacy of earning the respect of the natives, of respecting the natives, of having all of this experience in special forces warfare, guerrilla warfare, of saving his people on numerous occasions when Robert would get them into a pinch and they're all like gonna die or get captured, and Stark saves the day essentially. And hey, kitty. So this is going into Boston, and this isn't happening in a vacuum. Everyone in New Hampshire hears about what's going on, and so John Stark is like, even from when he's captured and when he comes back, and the whole story of him being captured by the Indians in the beginning, and then all of his successes and whatnot in the French and Indian War. He has an incredible popularity in the local people in New Hampshire as just the ultimate badass ranger, capable of incredible feats and saving his men and whatnot. Just everything positive. There's really not a negative thing against him. And so Boston, right? So the British are all surrounded in Boston, and it's on, and there's like cannons going off, and then so right after Lexington and Concord, and so John Stark's like, I'm called to duty. The militia is fighting, and therefore it's time to rally the forces and overthrow the imperial occupiers. And so he heads down to Boston to join the battle. And so he starts out as, everybody in his locality all wants to follow John Stark because they all know about him. They know he's the guy with the experience, and that's the whole point of a militia. Like, it's a meritocracy. If you're gonna put your life on the line, you want to make sure that the person leading is the person with the most experience, that is going to value your life, that's going to protect your life, and is not going to put you in unnecessary danger, and is going to lead you to victory. And so all of the people naturally trust John Stark because he has the experience and he has a whole history of doing that, in all of these special forces engagements throughout the Lake Champlain St. George watershed. So he shows up. When John Stark enters the scene in Boston, the British are under siege, and it's not a very well organized siege. So the first order of business is to tighten the noose of the siege, to deprive them of resources. So Stark um, works with some others to go basically raid some islands around Boston where there's a bunch of sheep and cattle, and to take the herds away, so that they don't have food in Boston. So they do that quite successfully, and there's something to do with a ship that like fires on them, and I think they end up like capturing the ship. That's not directly Stark, but like the people he's working with, the the capable people who know what they're doing. I think they like capture on Spitfire or some ship that's trying to like fire on them while they're raiding this island, and then the ship gets like stuck. It gets like run aground, and so they fire the ship. They capture the cannon from the ship and fire it. I think, like burn it. I think. Anyways, so that's the first action basically, and then that was successful. Stark's taking part in that, and then the next action is what's called Bunker Hill. So for some reason, this guy named Artemis Ward, who I'm pretty sure is a Mason. I'm not really sure, but some guy who's not supposed to be in charge, but because of some aristocratic reasons, because he has money and influence or something, he ends up being the commanding officer in this siege of Boston. Even though he doesn't really have the experience that John Stark does, but and so that guy's like a general, and John Stark's like a colonel, and so the general and maybe he was there first or something, because Boston is Massachusetts, and then Stark's coming down from New Hampshire, and so maybe he's like the head guy in Massachusetts of the Massachusetts militia or something. Boston, Massachusetts, yeah, something like that. But anyways, so this guy who's in charge is just a classic aristocratic fail. He's not. It's not meritocratic, so he doesn't know what he's doing, and so Stark is basically like the meritocratic guy who comes down like and is just in charge of, or there's like 1,000 people or something, many hundred people who want to follow Stark because they all know him personally, or they know him by his reputation, and they know that he's the best guy for the job. And so the Ward guy, the incompetent guy, is like setting up the or doing the battle plans for the siege, and they're like saying they gotta occupy Bunker Hill, and they do it all wrong. They don't have good officers. They go to the wrong hill, and they set up in the wrong position, and they basically walk themselves into a trap because they're all completely incompetent. And so they've got a whole bunch of guys basically like who they just went and put their head in a noose. They went to the wrong hill, Breed's Hill. They went to an indefensible position, and then they didn't send the necessary reinforcements, and they're basically just about to get overrun and just massacred. But then John Stark enters the scene. So then the British got all these like ships, and they're firing at like this little isthmus that connects like the little peninsula where Bunker Hill is, that then like overlooks Boston. They figure if they can occupy that and get some artillery there, then they have a good defensible position, and they can tighten the noose of the siege and drive the British out of the little town which is next to Boston, but on the north side, whatever that one's called. But they totally fail, and they're about to get overrun. And then and the reinforcements in the morning, like when the ships are shooting at them, and they realize they're just like exposed, and they didn't even fortify the right thing. They're in an undefensible position. And so John Stark shows up, and everyone else is just like in fear, and they won't even reinforce the people. And he just marches his companies. He's like a colonel. I think he's like in charge of a couple companies at this point. Um, Across the isthmus, like in the face of the cannon fire from the ships, when the other people, so there's like other officers who they're like too afraid to even go to the battle, to reinforce the people who are supposed to be on Bunker Hill but are on Breed's Hill. And these people who are cowardly, and they won't march into battle, these people will later get promoted above John Stark. They'll have French masons and German masons from abroad come and be promoted over John Stark. They'll have a merchant named Benedict Arnold, who has absolutely no experience and who fails in everything he does. They'll have him promoted over John Stark. They'll promote an aristocrat from New York and a slaveholder from Virginia, and all of these lawyers and all of these people with absolutely zero military experience, all promoted over John Stark, the one person who has, bar none, the most experience of the original Ranger, with years upon years of engagements, guerrilla warfare, American warfare, defeating the empirical forces of France at the time, because he was actually serving the British at the time. But anyways, um, So the cowards who will later get promoted over John Stark won't even march into battle. They just like they march their people out to hide from the military, basically from the cannon fire. But John Stark marches his people in good order across the isthmus under cannon fire, taking no losses, marches them up to the Breed's Hill. He organizes all the forces who don't have a defensible position. He creates a defensible position. He understands where the British are going to come from. He said there's a little emotional wave right there. Um so he sets up the entire battle plan. He sets up the entire line. He organizes everyone there. He knows exactly where they're going to come from. And then they're not even well stocked with ammunition, so he knows that they only have a few shots each and they have to wait until they're like super close before they fire. So he goes out and he puts sticks in the ground, or at least one stick in the ground, and he's like, do not fire until they march right up to the stick. So he's so far ahead of everyone that he knows exactly where they're going to come from. He knows exactly how they're going to march, and he and he has such confidence and awareness and mastery of the situation that he's able to make this, even though they walked into a trap, into an undefensible position, because all the leadership before him were absolutely appalling. And he salvages the situation. He makes the position defensible, and he educates all the people on what to do, when to fire in unison. And so the British do exactly what he thinks is going to happen. They march exactly how he thinks, and the people on defense, they wait until they get right to the stick in the ground that where Stark put the stick, and once they get to the stick, then they unload and they just absolutely massacre the British wave after wave. And this is the first major victory over the Imperial forces. That is, they just mowed down these fucking stormtroopers coming down the hill, just wave after wave of these stormtroopers, these redcoats, and but then they run out of ammunition, and the original position that he wasn't in charge of is getting overrun. All of his positions didn't get overrun, and then so he organizes an orderly retreat, and then they retreat in good order, and they have this massive victory, which if he was in charge in the beginning, they would have fortified the correct hill, and they wouldn't have had to retreat at all. But anyways, he snatched victory from defeat, and then withdrew in good order, so that defeat wasn't snatched from victory. And so he knows all about such things. And yeah, so then they still got the British in a siege, and in the meantime, the British, demonstrating their principles, they firebombed the port, or the town on the north shore of Boston. I want to say it's called, like, I don't know the name, but they just burned the entire town because that's what they do. So they've got no qualms about like firebombing entire cities um, when it serves their interest, and that's just for later reference. But anyways, so the British are, they basically, whether they get reinforcements, the British basically, they've got a whole army, they've got thousands of people, and they're all under siege in Boston. So it's not a very good position, but because they are supplied by sea, they can maintain this position. However, the situation changes when um, when Washington shows up on his high horse with his slave on another horse in his aristocratic things, and the Continental Congress says, "Oh, he should be in charge now." And so, what was the militia that just kind of rose? Then they try to just basically centralize everything under this foreign imperial slave master, who Virginia is foreign to the militia of Massachusetts and like the local people who showed up, but they're just going to put them all under this master mason, slave master, who started the last war, this warmongering, principle-less person who had already proved that he's a complete subject and slave of the new power system. And so they want to put that guy in charge of this whole army that shows up so it doesn't get out of control here. Because what the new power system, they don't really want a revolution. They just want an evolution of the power system that is separate from Britain but can also be controlled to serve the banking interests, essentially. And you'll see later on that that's all that Washington does, is he serves these foreign cabal of banking interests. Because of the Vermonters, the only people kind of equal to John Stark in greatness, as a collective. There's no individual that's equal to John Stark in greatness, but the Green Mountain Boys, the Vermonters, collectively are certainly equal to John Stark. Even though they're individuals, they're not a collective, but as just the militia and how great they are and their successes. So their flawless victory at Fort Ticonderoga, they get all of these artillery, and then Knox, this awesome artillery commander who also has a lot of experience and he knows what he's about, and he also gets out promoted by other people, but not nearly as bad as Stark. So he gets all these artillery to Boston, which Washington, under Washington's orders, even though he's doing it like, he waits like 5 months until the middle of like, so that is going on in winter, which if he knew what he was doing, he would have like done it right away, so that they would have been traveling in good weather. But ultimately, it's not really too bad to transport these things in the winter, because it's better in the winter than in mud season. Anyways, they get all these artillery to Boston, and so Washington's first idea is, let's storm the city. So now that we've got them under siege, and now that we've got all this artillery, let's storm the city. So the city is like basically like a fortified island kind of, and he wants to do an amphibious assault on a entrenched position across amphibious assault across the rivers into an entrenched position. It would just be an absolute massacre. He's a complete military imbecile. He's absolute failure. Like, no one should ever follow Washington in any military engagement. But his officers override him. They're like, no, why would you do that? You're a complete idiot. We already have them completely surrounded, and now we have all these artillery. So obviously the smart thing to do is use the artillery to put them in the best position so that the ships can't keep supplying Boston, and then we've got it completely surrounded and isolated in a siege, and then they'll have to surrender. Right, we'll have an absolute victory. The entire army will have to surrender, and we win. The whole war might be over right then if the entire army in Boston has to surrender. So Washington, whose first impulse is, let's send men to the slaughter and do an amphibious assault, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and let's snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. That's Washington for you. But he's overridden by his generals, or his officers, who at this point Stark is involved, and this is probably in the beginning kind of one of the things that makes Washington hate Stark and be ultimately jealous and envy of him, and only later on, when he absolutely has to, does he respect him. So they occupy Dorchester Heights or whatever. They send the artillery there. They get in a position where they can deny the shipping to Boston, and they do it successfully. And the Boston want to counterattack. So then the English have to do an amphibious assault on Boston, or on the Dorchester Heights, on a entrenched position. So obviously, if you're in the entrenched position and you're defending against an amphibious assault, and that's what happened at Bunker Hill, you have a huge advantage. The entrenched position defending against the amphibious assault. And so Washington wants to put himself in the weak position, but ultimately the generals override, and so they've got the strong position. The British have to do the amphibious assault, and they can't, because it's like wintertime, the sea conditions aren't good, and so the British can't even assault. So success. They've got the artillery in, they've got the army surrounded, they've got it under siege, and now it's just a matter of time before the entire army surrenders and they've got an absolute victory. However, Washington the Traitor is in charge, and he's going to figure out a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So what does he do? He, who was toasting the British king and whatnot in 1775 in his like officers thing, doing toasts to the king, being a master mason, just imperial agent all along, but just serving an empire that's not the British, another empire. Um, Anyways, he does diplomacy with the British, and he lets them all go. He lets them all go without a battle. They're completely surrounded. They're completely under siege. What they should have done is make them surrender, like Horatio Gates does after Stark hands him victory on a platter. Horatio Gates knows how to ensure victory, even though Benedict Arnold is trying to turn it into a defeat. Arnold, the agent of Washington, and the same people who back him. But Horatio Gates knows how to force an army to surrender. Not Washington though. And at some point, there's a battle of who should actually be the leader. Should be the top general for some like. And Horatio Gates, he's another British. He was a British officer, but anyways, the Masons and the people ensured that Washington stays under control because they don't want the best person for the job. They want the best puppet that is under their control for the job. And that's George Washington. And that's why when they write the history, they make sure that George Washington is deified. But anyways, so this is the third charge against Washington, is that when the entire army in Boston is surrounded and they should have surrendered, he lets them go without a fight, without anything. And then he turns it into a defeat where even when they had it would have been just the easy, like they could have just besieged them until they starved out. Or at that position, they could have just done to Boston what the British did to the other city, just firebomb Boston, give up one city, and you'll destroy the entire British army. And then you can rebuild the city. No big deal. All you've got in Boston at that point are the loyalists and the British army. So bombard the whole city, you get rid of the problem, and you win the war. Very simple. They've got all the artillery, they've got the position, they've got it under siege. That would have been the quick way. The short way would have just been to have it under siege, try to protect the city. And if you really care about the material things of the city, you can always rebuild a city. It's not like it was that nice of a city at the time. Those are the two options for victory: a quick victory, a slow victory. But George Washington chooses a loss where they let the entire army escape, and then they're going to call it a victory because they invert history. And so the whole British army gets away with no losses, and then they go up to the Nova Scotia area, they resupply, and then they end up coming right back down and going on the offensive. That same army that they had surrounded, under siege, ready to destroy. Then Washington consolidates the whole army. He brings all these people down to like New York, and then he starts running away and losing from that army that they just had surrounded. It's the most frustrating, retarded, imbecilic lack of strategy, just complete traitorous leadership that you can possibly imagine. And John Stark ends up just withdrawing. He's like, these are just a pack of retards. Like, I can't do this, and so I can't be part of this. Like, I can't submit myself and all the people I'm responsible for to these retard traitors who don't know what the hell they're doing and who will just throw us to death for absolutely no reason and are serving absolutely no strategic purpose. So it was just unforgivable that that happened at Boston. So Boston is the third charge. So the fourth charge against Washington is the fourth charge is basically when they when they usurp the Confederation of States that was created. So the Continental Congress was actually a secret gathering, which was a coup against the So the after the British are thrown out, they have a Confederation of States. So there's a number of there's 13 colonies that turn into states, and they have a loose knit agreement where each state is sovereign, and yet they have like a pact amongst all of them, a confederation, so that there can be kind of like peace and trade and whatnot in between them. But after there's some local rebellions against like one sovereign state or another, or some provocations, and then there's organization amongst the Masons, and the Masons and the Jews essentially, and other kind of aristocrats that have the same interests, other slaveholders and whatnot. The Second Continental Congress, was a coup that was done in secret that overthrew the Confederation and created a federation, a strong centralized government that would then overrule the sovereign states, and it was done in secret. And in the whole proceeding, George Washington is on a dais. He's on a raised platform. So the um, the cabal that's behind all of this, which is ultimately their foreign banking interests that are establishing this new power or they want to control the new power, they capture and control in order to fulfill the divide and conquer agenda. From the start, they put George Washington on as this coup Congress is going on in secret. Um, Locked up in a courthouse. Um, they know from the beginning that George Washington is going to be their coup leader. So because after the Revolutionary War, he had started this whole he started organizing all of the military and the officers and everything to make a standing army, and so that they would continue to get paid even after the war is over. So he has money backing him, and he was in charge of basically the military during the Revolutionary War, because he's put in that position, even though he has no right to be, um, meritocratically. So then they keep all of these officers on, they keep paying them essentially. So they've got this whole system of both of the Masons and now the paid officers. And when they're doing this coup Congress to create the strong centralized government, he's on a dais the whole time. He's on a raised platform above the other people, so he's the head of the coup. And then all of the scribes are basically figuring out the new agreement so that the new Pharisee can rule on high, George Washington, and rule over all the people and all the other people. Anyways, that's the second charge, is the Second Continental Congress, the federation of what was the Confederation. It was an unlawful coup. They were only supposed to modify um, the Confederation, but they basically just completely got rid of it and just started anew with this federated, so strong central government that overrides the sovereignty of the states, and therefore of the people as well. That's the fourth charge. The fifth charge is then when he's president of this federation, he sells out the um, the marketplace to the foreign cabal of bankers, creating the first central bank, which is owned something like 90% or somewhere between 75 to 90% by foreign banking interests. So he sells out so they centralize it, and then they sell the entire centralized thing out to foreign banking interests. So they indebt. They did all sorts of counterfeiting with their own counterfeit currency, the continental dollars, and then they use that to entrap all of through the military means, all of the military people and then the supplies to the military into this debt trap, this Ponzi scheme of uh, what was the word, of not forgery, but just making currency out of nothing. sorry, I'm blanking on the word. It was the same thing that Robert Rogers was doing that he got charged for before going into service. And boy, it's just blank, total blank. Counterfeiting. There you go, counterfeiting currency. So they counterfeit all this currency, they create all this debt, and they sell out now the centralized thing, the entire. Because if they were decentralized, that the foreign banking cabals would have to go state by state to take over each state, and they would probably get like 10 out of 13, but they wouldn't get probably like New Hampshire and maybe not Boston and maybe not like or maybe not Massachusetts and obviously not Vermont, but Vermont's not in that 13. Vermont's separate from all of that. Um, so, anyways, they centralize it, and then they create the first bank, the first national whatever bank, which is owned by foreign interests, and therefore they sell out the entire federal thing to the foreign thing. Okay, so that's charge number 5. He's a traitor to the entire country, the entire people, and there basically another charge is the whole the Cincinnati Society, basically how they organize this whole the standing army, which is antithetical to the revolution. So George Washington is the enemy of the revolution, but he's celebrated as the founding father of the entity that crushed the revolution ultimately, which is the federal government. So that's about the end of the first subject, talking about Washington. And I still haven't remembered the third subject. Oh, now I remember. Yes. Okay, so it's the second one. We're going to get into like the Nazis. And so the Nazis, so then because George Washington basically once the war is over, he centralized the government. They've made this standing army. Then the next thing they do is they go and they start genociding the Native Americans. And then that goes on for a long time. Their whole just genocidal campaign against the Native Americans, and they kill several million of them, I think. Um, and okay, so the second big subject is going to be to make the claim that the United States is worse than Nazi Germany, and objectively, that's true. So the United States has started way more wars than Nazi Germany. It's killed many orders of magnitude more people than Nazi Germany. It's committed more war crimes than Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany was inspired by the genocide that the Americans committed and the models that were instituted in the United States and the empire that it forged. So Germany was basically just imitating the genocidal empire that is the United States, and how they basically just genocided and conquered all these people and created all of these wars, all for their empirical ends and aims, and not for the betterment of the people, but for the benefit of the empire. So now the next outrageous claim, which is actually true, is that the United States is worse than Nazi Germany. So Nazi Germany, it was a national revolution to get out of the debt that was imposed on Germany after World War One. So they were enslaved by the cabal of bankers, and which had already enslaved America and enslaves the British people. That's why I called them both slave states when I made my offer of asylum to Candace Owens after she revealed that the French Empire, who's controlled by the Rothschilds, who also controls the British, and is basically just one arm of that banking cabal that also is working with, or got the green light from the people in the American administration to assassinate Candace Owens. So it's clear that there's not a safe place within either nation for the truth speakers, and there's a slight chance that all of that is all just for show. But following the character arc, I have faith in Candace Owens, and I believe she's a truth seeker, a truth speaker, and I think she's doing great things. And if if the federal government is signing off on an assassination against her, where is she to go? Where can she possibly go? Well, she can go to Elodium, which is the one free and sovereign state that is the capital of the free country of Vermont. So right, the Nazis. What about the Nazis? Well, the Nazis are basically the, oh boy, how do I present this in a way that is outrageously entertaining, truthful, and not dull? Because like getting into like the Ashkenazis and who the Nazis are serving, and the Swiss being neutral, and the Swiss Guard being who is controlling the personal guard of the Pope, and the Secret Service who controls the personal guard of the president, also being an arm of the Treasury. How both of those institutions, the heads of the institutions, these centralized things, are directly controlled by these banking cabals, which are geographically situated in Switzerland because it's a geographic fortress, and how it benefits them to do divide and rule and to create these world wars and to indebt both sides of the wars for their own benefit and power, because all they're concerned with is money. And how if you have money and if you're charging interest on the money for millennia, essentially, how you end up with all of the money mathematically. It's just a guarantee if you understand mathematics and interest and compounding interest, that when you have this going on for a lifetime, you can see how you get wealthy. When you have it going on for centuries, you can see how you can forge entire empires. When you have it going on for millennia and you eliminate all the other empires, you can understand how you can control the world mathematically through the financial system, because everything works on money, because the military just serve the financial interests, and that's the way that it's always been. So if you can control the finances and you can eliminate the enemies and you can divide and conquer all the competition, then that's how the world power is explained. And so the Germans, the Nazi Germany, was rebelling against that banking cabal, and yet at the same time they put in charge a person, a centralized figure. You can never trust these centralized figures, which is why my continual reflection and reminder to myself is to never become a centralized figure, to always be promoting decentralization and and that as a principle, that it's all about the people being sovereign, not having one ruling over all, but having all from the bottom up, um, voluntarily creating their own systems of organization as opposed to systems of governance. So the idea of a government is a top-down thing. It's governing the mentality of the people, the state of being of the people, as opposed to if you have a bottom-up system, then all you need is organization, like people organizing to solve problems. You don't need a government ruling over. You just have people solving problems from the ground up. So the revolution, the American Revolution, was that it was the revolution of the sovereign people overthrowing the top-down system of empire. And yet by the time of the Second Continental Congress, that was basically the coup that ended the revolution. So the revolution was defeated from within. And even though they tried to defeat it in the beginning by putting all of these leaders in charge who were traitors, the people still prevailed and overthrew the external empire. But then it was defeated from within by setting just up a new domestic empire, and that ended the revolution. And the idea of all of the people, individual sovereigns, that all of the people are sovereign, and they can only create a sovereign state because the sovereignty originates with the people, and therefore the people can empower a state to be sovereign, and the states can empower a confederation amongst the states to have a degree of sovereignty because the states are sovereign. But then they invert the whole thing, and then they imitate the top-down European model where there's a singular sovereign and the sovereign governs over everyone else. And then that's what they make the federal government into. And then George Washington is the cult leader, the idol of that whole system. But it's the same, it's controlled by the same system that was behind Columbus and that was behind Vespucci, which is why Amerigo, which is why the whole continent is named after Amerigo, why Columbus is what the capital is named after, and what there's a country named after, and the university is named after, and there's a whole holiday for Columbus because he's serving this foreign banking cabal. Not that he did anything good. It was already discovered. All he did is rape and pillage and conquer on behalf of the banking cabal and the empire and generating profit for them. And that's what all of the history is promoting people who serve this evil empire. It's not promoting people like John Stark, who is a champion of the actual revolution, of the actual people, of meritocracy and the bottom up, which is the idea of a republic or a democratic republic. So in the beginning, they basically of the country they end up having two parties. They have a federalist party who's all about the feds. That's what wins in the end, the feds, and then they have a democratic republic group who are the bottom-up meritocratic people. So John Stark is in the Democratic Republic group. Madison, Jefferson, all of the good people are in the bottom-up Democratic Republic people. Then you have the top-down imperial people. You have Washington, you have Hamilton, and the judge people. And now you have the Federalist Society. So the feds are entrenched. They are the deep state. And they represent this foreign banking cabal and empire and federalization and strong central government and standing armies. This is all antithetical to what was the original idea of a bottom-up democratic republic, sovereign people. And so now both the Democrat and the Republican Party are two branches of the Federalist Party, and there is no party that represents the sovereign people because that's how the power has evolved over time. The government, the banking institutions, the judicial system, the entire military system is all consolidated under the power of this federal banking cartel, which is controlled by foreign banking families, which go back millennia. So I referenced this Thomas Paine's essay on the origin of Freemasonry. And if you look up on Wikipedia, they'll say Freemasonry started in England in the 1850s, but that's just a lie. And so according to the history back in Thomas Paine's time, Thomas Paine is probably the most trustworthy author of the time, being the guy who wrote Common Sense, and person who puts his life on the line and who puts the fruits of his labor are the ideas of principles being propagated to the masses. So that's one of the best. He's like the Candace Owens of his time, basically, Thomas Paine. So anyways, yeah, in this, on the origin of Freemasonry, they say that the Freemasons, they claim their origin is the Tower of Babel, basically. And going back to the pyramid builders, and he's got this whole narrative about the Druids, of how the Druids and the religion, it was all about the sun, which is all a good thing because that's ultimately the source of all life on this planet. Everything is all energized by the sun, so it makes sense to have the sun as the center of appreciation, because everything, all of our warmth, all of our food, everything that our life, everything is all coming from the sun. All of the energy is all coming from the sun. Absent the sun, it's a frozen ball of a frozen crusty shit ball, basically, because the crust is just this little shit layer on top of a hot rock, and absent the sun on the outside, it would be completely frozen and there'd be no life. other than what's on the inner, because there's life on the inner. Inside the shit crust, there's all sorts of biological activity, and that's what creates oil. Obviously, oil is not dinosaur fossils. Well, in a way, you could kind of say it is, but it's life, like um, bacterial and all sorts of life that exists based off of the heat from the inside of the earth, and then in between that and the crust, there's all sorts of life going on, and that's what makes oil. It's a renewable resource, and it's just one part of the con to tell you that it's like an exhaustible, like fossil bones or something, that it's just part of the control mechanism to say that to centralize the control of this energy resource that comes from the earth and keep people enslaved, essentially. So I was thinking that like the whole Nazi thing was gonna be a big a subject that might be kind of like contentious, to be like the U.S. is worse than Nazi Germany. The U.S. has killed orders of magnitude more innocent people than Nazi Germany did. Nazi Germany was trying to fight against this banking cabal, and ultimately all of the countries in the banking cabal were then mobilized to defeat Nazi Germany, so that there is no country, or there's no nation state that exists. They want to control the whole country. The position of the Pope is claims all of the souls and all of the land on earth. But if that's the case, they've got too much power, and the banking cabal needs to actually be in control, not the Pope. And sometimes the Pope will rebel against the banking cabal, like happened in 13 whatever year when they backstabbed the Knights Templars, and took their wealth, and then that's why the Protestant movement started, because they needed the banking cabal needed to divide and conquer the Catholic Church's power, so they funded the credit of the British Empire and the Protestant Church and the German Protestant Church, so that they could check the absolute power of the Catholic Church. And then when the British church and their empire got too strong, then they backed the American empire, so that they can check the British Empire and divide and rule, divide and rule, divide and rule. And so now the same thing is going on, and there's a controlled demolition of the American empire that's going on, and they'll squeeze every last bit of power and control out of it that they can, and they'll leave the people in destitution, especially since they're getting upset that the people are waking up. So then they'll like I've said, they'll set up concentration camps, just like Germany, and they'll do what the Germans did to the populaces that they had to concentrate, and they also they learned from what the Americans did in oh man, I might get that wrong. But anyways, the Americans had their own history of concentration camps, right? With the natives, they did concentration camps for the Native Americans, and then they introduced disease and starvation, or whether they introduced the disease or they just basically starved them, and then famine follows, or plague follows famine naturally, and so every single war that the U.S. has been in has been an unjust war of aggression, except for the War of 1812, but that was also a war of aggression, but it was kind of with cause. I got a couple books on that. I haven't read it yet, but basically it just gets worse and worse over time as the infiltration of the cancerous rot in the centralization of power gets more and more control. So the Revolutionary War wasn't the United States. It was pre-United States. That was a just war. And then the War of 1812 arguably was a just war. I don't fully understand it, but it has something to do with the British. Um, I think it was a just war. I think it was a largely British provocations and everything. So the U.S. relative to the War of 1812 is analogous to Japan relative to World War II. So what the British were doing to the U.S. pre-War 1812 is what the U.S. and their allies were doing to Japan pre-World War II. So basically strangulating them and their maritime trade, and economically blockading them and cutting them off of resources, which is acts of war in and of themselves, but they do these silly little semantic games to be like, well, it's not really war. It's just seizing your ships and shutting down your resources and strangulating you. And then they do that first, and then the other person, when they, so imagine you go up to someone and you start strangling them, and but then they punch you, and then they make rules that say, well, strangulation isn't assault but punching is assault. The way that you hit them with the fist, that force on force action, that was high impact, and therefore that's a high impact event, that's war. But the strangulating, they gently put their hands around your neck, and then they were gently squeezing. It was very gentle, all of it. And that's not a high impact event, that's not a war. That's just a little simple little economic squeeze, just a little sanction blockade. That's not war, even if that's going to kill you. Probably even worse than like the high impact event, or more directly. So it's like a better thing to do. And I've been in this situation. In fact, on a bus when I was in middle school, a person tried to strangulate me. They put their hands around my neck and they started squeezing because they didn't like me. And I was probably doing some other little thing. I was probably doing like spitballs or something, and like one of them hit them or something like that. Um, so I'm like not without I'm not purely a victim in this situation, but they then um, their response was to strangulate me. So they put their hands around my neck and they started strangulating me. And so my response was to punch them in the face. And so it's a natural response. If you're getting strangulated, you got to punch the person in the face to end the strangulation. I mean, that's the most direct, appropriate response. And that's what Pearl Harbor was. Japan was getting strangulated, and Pearl Harbor was them trying to punch America in the face. Um, yet anyways, that's a whole nother thing. So yeah, so basically the point here is that before this is all said and done, before the American empire collapses, it will show you how much worse than Nazi Germany it is. It already is much worse throughout its whole history and all of its wars of aggression, and it's killed way more people than Nazi Germany did, a lot more innocent people. They probably in Japan alone, they probably killed more people than Nazi Germany did, um, of their own people, anyways. But I don't know, the Nazis killed like a whole lot of Russians, like tens of millions of Russians, and so if you add up all the people that Americans have killed between the natives, the Koreans, the Vietnamese, the Japanese, and lots of other wars, um, they're probably about even. But my postulation is that the Nazis were just learning from America. America is like seeded. They're serving the same interests, but a lot of their concentration camps and whatnot, they were learning from how the Americans, the United States Empire, dealt with the natives. Um, and what I think is that before this is all said and done, I mean, COVID is a great example. You can see how they started the concentration camps. They took away all of the freedoms. They locked everyone down, and that seemed like a big step at the time, but that's just one step along a path of the death of an empire, and how in these last stages, all of the people who are in power are the worst people, like the worst of all possible people. The greatest, most evil psychopaths are all funneled into these positions of government. And what the government does is these crazy, evil, psychopathic things. And they create all these staged events, all of these lying things in order to gain more power and wealth. And it's the same story repeated all throughout history. And so what you're going to have is all of the good people will exodus the government. Like you just had this thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is leaving. She took a principled stand, faced too much pushback, realized the whole thing is just an evil joke show, evil clown show. And and is withdrawing. So Thomas Massey is kind of like the well, there's Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna at this point, and then Rand Paul. But I think they'll all get Rand Paul is a little bit more corrupted than the other two. I don't know anything about Ro Khanna, but as Thomas Massey goes, he's like who's the guy who was in this, who was in like Sodom or whatever, and they need him to leave before they nuke the city, and the angels are like, we're not going to nuke the city with you here. There's one good person in this city, and even though the entire thing is evil, you being there, it would we wouldn't sacrifice one person to kill a whole city of evil sodomites. But they prove to him that there's not another good person in the entire city, and they convince him to leave, and they're like, all right, we got the last good guy out of the city, now we can nuke the fucking thing and get rid of these demons. So that's what's going to happen basically. So when Thomas Massey gets out, when he's driven out, then the angels will deliver us from from these sodomites. And they're all sodomites. They're all like completely morally perverted in all the ways, and they cover for each other. There's a video of like some senator sodomizing his aide in the Senate, in the chamber, that they say the whole like January 6th thing. They're like, look at these American people violating the Senate chambers and respectfully dealing with like the police officers who let them in, and just kind of going on a guided tour. And look how the guy with the Viking horn stood on the dais and did a performatory thing, and they led a prayer and whatever. It's like, how dare them, they're traitors, like lock them up. It's like, so what did they do? They walked into the public building and just made their opinion known, and then like peacefully left, except for obviously like the 150 FBI Fed agent provocateurs who are trying to change the whole narrative, because they've already proven that there was hundreds, over 100 of federal agents provocateurs trying to make it into this awful thing. But meanwhile, you have the actual senator who works in the thing sodomizing someone in that chamber, actually defiling it, and there's no charges. They actually have a fund to cover up all of their sex crimes and pedophilia and whatever, all the bullshit that they do. There's a congressional fund, taxpayer funded fund, to cover up all of their sex crimes, and to make sure like you're paying for that. You're paying to ensure that your enslavers have a little treasure chest to buy off whoever complains against them. Like, you're a complete slave if you continue tolerating this. And it's so funny to see all of the people who are uplifted in this paradigm um just preach the party, preach the voting, preach all of the institutions, and how and the morality, and the thing is that you gotta vote, and you gotta support your politician, and we gotta bread and circus. And then like the politicians at this point are just another form of bread and circus, and the WWF has taken over the presidency, and they're making up all of these fake events, and they want you to think it's true regardless of how fake it is. There's people who watch WWF and they think that's real wrestling, and then there's other people who know that it's not real, but they appreciate the craft of it. And then there's other people who just couldn't give a fuck and don't want to see overweight people in like thongs manhandling each other. It's like, what the hell are you, like, how is that entertainment? Like, that's the gayest thing I've seen. um but people like gay things for entertainment because the culture is corrupt, and there's not really any good examples. And there's one girl I've got to reach out to, she was a friend, and she was so funny in middle school, and I really appreciate her. And she liked wrestling, and I've got nothing against her, and I think she's a great person, and maybe she'll see this. And I don't want to say anything negative against you, and I think you're a great person, and I know you like the wrestling, and I don't hold it against you at all. She plays softball, and her name starts with a J, but I'm not gonna say her name. Anyways, Most people whose names start with a J are good people because it's a good letter to start your name with. Uh, K is more rigid, but I gave up the K. The S is the most complicated because it's really hard to maintain a position with an S because it's actually one of the most difficult letters to write. A K is super easy. It's like strong, it's rigid, straight lines. A J is actually pretty difficult as well. A J is almost as hard as an S because you got to maintain a horizontal level thing on top of this like hook, which is like that's super hard. But an S is almost as hard because it's got to be symmetrical. It's got to be the same kind of loop as a J, but instead of ending with the horizontal plane, you've got another loop on top, and you've got to maintain balance with that. So it's even harder than a J. So it's really easy to go wrong with S's. But when you get a good S, it's magnificent. But a J, yeah. Anyways, what am I saying? So yeah, the U.S. is worse than Nazis. George Washington is the ultimate traitor to the revolution. And then the third one, we're gonna get into Christianity. We're only 2 hours in, and obviously there's gonna be like two people who want to listen to this. So Christianity, this is where do I start? We start with the original Christian, John the Baptist. So there's many Christed individuals. What is Christ? Where's the thing? Um, cry, Cree, shit. Anyways, there's a symbol. Sorry, it's a Greek symbol. Let's see if I can reproduce it. It's like a P. It's like there's like a P with like a cross in it. Darn it, I have the thing right around here. I've got all these. I'm surrounded by books here. I've read all these books. I read after my one thing about Sinead O'Connor. I read her autobiography, and that was awesome. And it gave me so much insight into her. I can't find my darn Bible. Where is it? Yeah, I'm messing up the video big time here. I got books all over the place, and the thing is, my couch becomes like a throne, and I put all these things around me, so it's like efficient, and I don't have to go anywhere. And here it is. You'll be able to see it. This is the symbol of Christ. It's not a cross. The cross is the inversion of Christ, and is the symbol of Satan. So this is the symbol of Christ. Let me show it to you again. This is the only symbol of Christ, and it's Greek, and it's two root words. It's like Cree and like I don't even know what they are. But and I don't know what it means either. But get this book, and you'll learn what it is, even though I haven't learned it yet. Anyways, we're trying to start at the beginning, and whatever. That's the symbol. So just like the Revolution, the American Revolution, the Vermont Revolution, really. I don't call it the Vermont Revolution because it started in Vermont. So the Vermont, well, anyways, I have to communicate with the audience and make a thing known. How's this Overton window going? I feel like the wormhole is vibrating right now. It's like we're losing connection, but we're going to carry on with Christ. So it starts with John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is the crossover point from the Judaic tradition into the Christian tradition. And Jesus, in a way, is as well, but more so John, because Jesus is just following in John's footsteps, and John is who christened Jesus, and Jesus didn't start his year of ministry. It was basically only a year. It's not like he was going on for that long. Basically a year of ministry, and he basically started it right around when John got put in prison and before the Jews cut John's head off for being too holy. And well, think about what he was doing. He was going out in the desert, and he was baptizing people. So that's like a death sentence in the land of the Jews. Actually, that wasn't what he was killed for. He was killed for criticizing the king and for criticizing the fact that that he married his dead brother's wife after. Anyways, it was a free speech crime. He criticized the person in power, and therefore head chop. It's kind of like I think that still happens in Saudi Arabia, and it'll happen in the United States too before the next 3 years are done. In fact, it has it happened yet? Has anyone who criticized Trump been killed yet? No, but Trump isn't really the power, he's the puppet. So have people been killed for criticizing Israel? Oh yeah, yeah, Charlie Kirk recently just got killed, unless that was all staged, and it could have been. I'm still like 50-50 whether it was he was removed or he was killed. But regardless, I think the reason for it are the same because he was criticizing the power system. And there's some Greek that you can they've known for a long time that if you want to know who rules, figure out who you can't criticize. And so the most important thing to do is to do that. To do that thing you're not allowed to do. You got to criticize the power system, and you got to do everything that you can to speak truth to power and use ridicule too. Like the fool is the ultimate revolutionary because they are a master at ridiculing power in the face of power. And it's a very fine line because off with your head comes really quick. Um, but the fools are the favorites. The favorites of the Most High are the fools because they serve the Most High and they have the most dangerous jobs and it requires the most skill and they bring the most humor and they spread the most truth. And the fools are the kings of paradise. And yet, in this earthly realm, which is claimed by Satan, they are derided ultimately because they are deriding them, and so they have to deride them, and it's just they don't the deriders have no creative capacity, and so all that they can do is imitate. They deride the integrators, and then they imitate them, and they try to basically claim them. Like they'll literally take the face, they'll steal the face, and then they'll put it on another face. Like in the Game of Thrones, they've got that whole thing where they like steal their face, and there's like a phrase like rip their face off. Like there are facial surgeries, and people get new faces. You can look into it, and it's very advanced. And then they also have clones. That's a great way to steal a face. So you take a clone of someone, and you raise that clone in complete control. And when you've got them ready, or you need to eliminate the original person who's a threat, then you just replace them with the clone. And they've been cloning people for a long time. It's not some kind of conspiracy. It's been going on for decades. And yeah, how do you think? Anyways, I won't get into that. So right, Christianity starts with John the Baptist and carries on with Jesus. And I was going to say it doesn't really start with John the Baptist because ultimately Christ is an eternal reality. So it doesn't start with one person. It's not like the person, but Christianity starts with John the Baptist. And anyways, what do I want to get to? I'm not going like I got to make this a story that's interesting. So um so Satan founds in the Bible. Look up on your Google, say who is the only person in the Bible that Jesus called Satan, and they're going to tell you it's Simon. And then look up on Google, who is the patriarch of the Catholic Church, and then it's going to say Simon. So if you're a Christian, then there's no contention to understand that Satan is the patriarch of the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church is the Church of Satan. That's just a fact. If you believe Jesus, who is supposed to be the head of the cult of Christianity. So we'll go with that. So I consider myself a Christian, actually, an OG Christian. So there's not a lot of OG Christians left, but the OG Christians look at the original Bible, which was composed by Saint Marcion, and there is no Jew Bible in the original Bible. It's just the Christian Bible. So the Bible that you think is the Bible, the first 75% of it is the Jew Bible, and then they stick, and it's more than 75%. It's more like 90 to 95% Jew Bible. Because what they do is they take the original Christian Bible, composed by St. Marcion, they multiply that by 3. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They multiply it by 4, and then they add in a bunch of extraneous things. They make up some propaganda to throw in as well. So of the 25% roughly that is they call the Christian Bible, it's actually more like somewhere between like maybe 5 to 7% of that is actually the Christian Bible, and then that 5%, which is the Marcion, the original Christian Bible, then they corrupt that largely to corrupt the content. So even the 5% that's Christian is largely corrupted. But you do have some truth in there. There's some truth in there. There's got to be something in there to derive, right? You gotta. If it's just derision, then there's no meat. There's no substance to it. So they gotta give you like 2 to 7. We'll say 2 to 7% of the real thing, and then about 93 to 98% of derision. And so Peter, Simon, he put that Catholic Church together, and he fought against Marcion, and made this kind of empire that served the Jews, and kind of included 2 to 7% of Christianity in it to have at least some meat there. But I'll get into, so what is Christianity? So if you look at the original Bible, formed in 144 AD, so like I was talking here, like you want to go back as far back in history as you can to get the less adulterated version of the history. Because there's countless versions of the Bible. It's incredible how many versions of it there are. But there's only one original. And pretty much all of the versions since the original are like 75 to 97% the Jewish Bible. So if you actually want the Christian Bible, you go back to the Christian Bible. That's 100% Christian. So that's the original Bible composed by St. Marcion. And so it is essentially the gospel. You don't need four versions of the gospel, of like adulterated versions which are retold for different audiences. Basically, you just need the one original version of the gospel, and then it has the letters of Paul, who is considered the kind of the greatest evangelist of Christianity after Jesus, having been saved from like probably the most evil, or one of, if not the most evil kind of people, persecutors of Christians, and then all of that weight of negativity and evil that was concentrated was converted by direct confrontation with Christ through Jesus as a living person on the road to Damascus, and blinded him with the truth and the light, and then restored his sight so that he saw through the eyes of Christ. So it has the original gospel, and then it has the letters of Paul. That's the original Bible. That's it. So you're just focusing on the best sources of, and the writings of Paul still don't compare to the gospel really. the works and the writings, it's all kind of like, it's good, but it doesn't really compare. So I would even just say the gospel itself in the original Bible is really all you need to understand what Christianity is. And what is Christianity? It is the practice of exorcising demons and and navigating a world of sin, and how time, this is like an extrapolated part of it. It's not about this, but time is not linear. Time is relative. Oh boy, we're not getting to time right now. Sorry. So yeah, the original Bible, it's all about exorcising demons and going into the heart of evil, bearing the truth, and following the guidance of the Most High and exorcising demons. That's basically all it is. Um, yeah. So that's a great religion, a great spiritual practice to exorcise demons. I've done it. It's a service to do. It heals people, and to pass demons along to the realm in which they belong, and to liberate the living beings from demons is about the best service that you can provide in this world. Because when a person is inhabited by a demon, A, they don't realize it, and B, they're eternally tormented by that demon. So if you can separate the person from the demon, then the person can be healed, and the demon is, they do their demon things. They go on and they look for another host, or they move on to a realm where a host can host them. Part of the story is that they basically, they end up concentrating, um, in hosts that host the demons. So, um, yeah, that's what Christianity is, and that's the archetype of Jesus, is simply going into a demon infested place, the evilest culture, the most evil culture at the time, and going into the, who would behead the holiest man for criticizing the king, and even though he's renowned through the land for his holiness and his good works, he gets beheaded because he disagrees with one thing the king does, and then they crucify Jesus. And what did Jesus do? He just had different ideas, and basically, but it's not, but it's a spiritual warfare of good versus evil, and demons are like individual souls of evil that can inhabit people, and people are water vessels, and primarily water vessels. We are the life in between, the realms, and made up of the various elements, and we can relate with, spirits that are both good and might be called angelic, or evil, which might be called demons, and both exist and both are real, and it's up to us to like a radio station. It's up to you to turn the dial to choose what station you're going to tune into, and you can there's a lot of different stations to tune into, and some are more angelic and some are more demonic, and to separate, to transcend that, dichotomy, is awareness. And for the most part, demonic, those inhabited by demons are, well, no, it's not true. You can be aware or unaware in both realms. People can be highly aware demonic, entities, who they're very aware of what they're doing, and they'll even do, these satanic rituals to further, consolidate their power and control in this realm. And you can have people who are very aware light workers, who, like archangel Michael, who basically do battle consciously with these demonic forces, knowing that Satan is a servant of the Most High and cannot cannot what? Cannot betray his master, cannot inhabit a vessel that they can. Focus. Satan cannot go against the Most High, and yet Satan has its own agenda in this realm in which he plays. And yet, when his minions are confronted, they flee before the Most High because that's all they can do, because they are subversive, but subversive isn't the right word. They are, because you can't actually subvert the Most High. They can try. So they're bound in lies and illusion and delusion, and they serve their own interest. But in doing so, unknowingly, they serve the interests of the Most High, and they cannot fight against the Most High any more than the armies of Variable could fight against Arhuna, or I don't have another example really. Arhuna in the Bhagavad Gita, which I haven't also read, but that was a great offering from another woman who was very healing in my life. Anyways, so Christianity is basically the religion of real Christianity is the religion of serving, of being in alignment with Christ. However, only the original Christianity is that. All the other sects of Christianity, which just like the Bible, it's like 92 to 98% of it, 92 to 97, up to 99%, they're all serving Satan without knowing it. And their Bible, their book of knowledge, is not the Christian one. So if you think you're a Christian, here's the challenge. If you think you're a Christian, buy the original Bible, 144 AD by Saint Marcion, even though he actually composed it earlier, because this one is 128 AD. And I'm not sure if there's a date discrepancy, why there's a 16-year discrepancy, but I think that was like, anyways, 144 or 128. So it's the original Bible, and read that and then contrast it with what you previously thought of as the Bible. And if you're a Christian, you will renounce what you originally thought of as the Bible, and you will accept the true Bible, because it's like light and dark. It's like the allegory of the cave. Once you've come out of the cave and you've seen the sun, you can no longer pretend that the fire is the sun. The fire in the cave and the shadows on the wall, it's all just an illusion. So I challenge you. It's $10 on Amazon, $9.99, less than $10. But you got to pay your tax, so it's going to be over $10 because Satan rules your merchant, the ports and the merchants, and rules over you, and you can't engage in the free market. Have you seen all of these cool cars coming out of China? They've got such cool cars and such cheap cars, but you can't get them. No, you can't get them. You can't get them because you're a slave. They've got cars in China. I could get this sweet new truck, a brand new truck, for probably $8,000. Nope. Can't get them. You're a slave here. You can't get any. There's no free market. Not in the United States. Nope. Tariffs. That's the Satan's puppet's favorite word is tariffs. And yeah, I've interacted with all of these people, and the weird thing about Trump is that he like the interactions I've had with him haven't really been negative. All so the first experience I had with Trump was at a carnival, and he was trying to give me as an offering like carnival tokens, like or like think of it as like an arcade token. So he was like at a carnival and he's trying to give you like an arcade token as an offering. It's all symbolic, but you can imagine if like someone gives you some arcade tokens, like this is useless unless I'm at the arcade. Like if I'm not going to the arcade, what the hell are you giving me? This is Monopoly money, and I'm not playing Monopoly right now. That was the first. What was the second? Try to be accurate. There might have been a second one I forgot, but the next one is Trump kind of like Richie Rich, and he's got this mansion, and he's spying on people from his mansion who are at the pool, and he's got a secret layer within the mansion, and he's got a virtual reality thing where he can like play like he's in the dream world in the virtual reality world, and he's in a conflict with uh Sophia, the kind of the female energy of nature, and also his neighbors, and he's kind of walking me through his realm. Oh no, that was number 3. Number two was it's like a grocery store being like a slaughterhouse. Like a grocery store being like the most dangerous place you can imagine, where there's like flying blades like flying around, and then there's all of these kind of like if imagine like at Halloween, if you've ever been to like a horror thing and they've got all these things like arranged at you to scare you. It's like that merged with a grocery store. It's like a person who's probably never been to a grocery store and who thinks that it's like as scary as like a haunted house. That a grocery store is a haunted house. That was 2. So then I told you 3. Number 4, most recently, Trump. No, 4 was the best one. 4 was when he aligns with Christ and he looks directly at first he's afraid because he's had some mushrooms, and he's going through the phase in the early mushroom experience where it's kind of like turning inside out and it's like uncomfortable and there's like fear, but he's in like discomfort, and he's surrounded by aides, and like all these people just kind of like surrounding him and like waiting on him. And when you're going through that, and all these people like looking to him, and when you're going through that, it's just like, oh, so I can only imagine how uncomfortable. And then he looks at Christ, and when everyone else is looking at him, then he looks to Christ, and there's just a moment of unity and beauty and transformation and guidance. And so he had like a moment of being in alignment with Christ. A moment, only a moment. And then he's off on a mission and trailing the followers, his follower people trailing him. Was that 5? Did I say 5? So the next one is the most recent on a big ship, big steel ship, kind of like a cruise ship, but a lot heavier, a lot more steel. So maybe it's not a water ship. It could be like a spaceship, and it's a big spaceship, so big that it has an audience hall that could be related with a huge ceremony hall. That's just like if you think of like the Star Wars movie when they have their big Republic hall, that huge open space. It's kind of like that, but maybe a little bit that mixed with a sports arena, and so like a big stadium with then a big thing, and then he's walking around there, and with Christ, or with uh, a servant of Christ following him, and him wanting that one to be well armed, wanting the forces of Christ to be as well armed as possible. Okay, so those are all my interactions with Trump. And so that's what's really confusing, because it's like it starts off, and one and two might have been confused with one or the other, but they probably are. Two was probably one. It probably started off complete fear and detachment from normalcy. The second one, it's like the middle ground is like a carnival and wanting to like pay in worthless things and not understanding. Um, I just forgot what the third one was. Anyways, there's sort of a progression, and it's a very positive progression, and it is completely in contrast with what is seen in the public, which confuses me. And so I try not to be too harsh. Even though everything that I see is like everything that I see in the political realm is really satanic, and yet there's this slight mitigating dimension. So you can't really give up on people. You can never give up on people, because even the worst people can always be saved, and they can always repent, and things can be complicated. And anyways, so Christ, Barry, has anyone listened to this, Soren? Yeah, so Christ is all about fighting demons and exorcising demons, and that's it, really. That's what Christianity is. It's exorcising demons, and but also learning the truth, and speaking the truth, and relating that truth with people, and a love and appreciation for life. And so life, love, truth, and driving forth the demons. So like this whole realm we live in, if everyone was a real Christian, then this realm wouldn't be ruled by demons. The demons would be driven forth, and they would have to find another realm to exist within if they persist in rejecting the Most High. And so that's the best thing we can do, is to be in alignment with and serve life, and speak the truth, and love life, and also drive forth the demons. And all the deriders are demons, and yet when they have some decent food, they'll at least have some good food. And that's the most important thing that we can do to be healthy, is to eat good food, and that's preventative medicine, so that we don't become sick. So on this Thanksgiving, I hope you have some good food. I hope you're as healthy as can be, and you share that good food and that health, and appreciate life in that feast over that dead turkey you're going to eat, and understand that it was a blessed creature, and bless that turkey for its sacrifice. And thanks for listening, and I hope I gave you some food. That's all.